Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Millionaire saw former cleaner with twins at airport, the truth changed everything. JFK Airport, New York. Terminal 4. It was one of those summer mornings when the air was charged with electricity, when the light entered in oblique beams through the immense bay windows, caressing the polished marble of the floor like a promise of departure. The passengers, hurried and noisy silhouettes, streamed by like an uninterrupted human river, rolling bags in hand, earbuds screwed into their ears, too busy to look at each other. The announcements echoed in a loop: final boarding call for Flight 7A to Lisbon, security check begins at Gate 14, interspersed with children's cries, nervous whispers, exasperated sighs. In the Zone VIP, there was a different atmosphere, more subdued, slower, almost detached from the tumult of the ordinary world. Thick carpets, beige leather armchairs, champagne glasses already filled. Smooth faces, tanned by extended stays on the islands, tapped nervously on their screens. Sitting in the center of this golden bubble, sat a man of icy calm, Ethan Callahan, 48 years old, his piercing gaze hidden behind thin-framed black sunglasses. His midnight blue suit, hand-sewn in Milan, seemed tailored for the discipline itself. On his wrist he wore a rare Patek Philippe, given to him after his company's IPO, Calitech, which in a decade has become a sprawling cybersecurity empire. At his feet, a black, grained leather briefcase, locked with a fingerprint. Inside, the documents of a colossal acquisition, $200 million, a Swiss military encryption company. Ethan didn't sweat. He mastered numbers, deals, and silences. But this morning, something was going to upset his well-oiled machinery. He sipped a scalding hot espresso, legs crossed, mechanically scanning the compact lines of his digital calendar. Meeting with the Swiss Minister of Innovation. Dinner with the CEO of Sky Security. Takeoff in an hour. He looked up distractedly, as if observing an aquarium with an absent gaze. And then, he saw her. Beyond the tinted windows that separated the elite from the ordinary world, a black woman walked with a brisk but heavy step. She held two battered suitcases tightly, one in each hand, while holding two identical children clinging to her dress. They were about 6 years old. Twins, obviously. Beautiful children with luminous complexions, unruly black curls, and bright eyes. The woman wore a simple dress of crumpled cotton, slightly worn sandals, and a backpack slung over one shoulder. And yet, there was a kind of unadorned elegance about her. She seemed tired, certainly. But not broken. She moved forward, straight, focused, as if each step was carried by an invisible mission. The children chattered around her, laughing among themselves, pulling their mini suitcases as if they were setting off on a magical adventure. One stopped to kiss her arm. The other looked up and pointed at a plane taking off. The woman smiled briefly, never letting go of their hands. Something about the scene struck Ethan in the heart. It was not just the image of this courageous mother, alone with her children. It wasn't just the raw emotion of this contrast between worlds. It was her. A beat. A flash. A memory. He narrowed his eyes. The blood pulsed slightly faster in his temples. This gait. This stature. This head carriage. A name, forgotten but suddenly present, slowly resurfaced in his memory, like a memory thought to be buried. Mariah? He jumped up. The coffee cup wobbled on the coffee table and nearly spilled. A few VIP passengers glanced briefly at him, surprised to see the impeccably controlled man moving so quickly. But Ethan didn't even see them. He crossed the glass-enclosed lobby like a man caught in an electric shock. It wasn't nostalgia. Nor was it curiosity. It was something else. Ancient impulse, visceral, pre-verbal, as if a forgotten part of him had suddenly awakened. Each step echoed against the tiles. He made his way between suitcases, children on scooters, kissing couples, and embracing families. But his gaze remained fixed on her. When he reached her, the woman turned her head. Slowly. She looked straight into his eyes, without startling, without surprise. As if she were waiting for him. As if she knew, sooner or later, that they would cross paths again. She had changed. Her face, still as beautiful in its simplicity, now bore the marks of time, fatigue, motherhood, but also of a calm strength, indestructible. Her skin, darker than she remembered, seemed bathed in an inner light. And his eyes, still so lively. Eyes that had seen everything. And remembered everything. Yes, it was her. Mariah Jenkins. The name echoed painfully in his memory. A quiet woman who had worked in his vast Westchester villa almost 10 years ago. She cleaned early in the morning, came home late. Always polite, never intrusive. She observed more than she spoke. And then, one morning, she disappeared. Without a word. Without explanation. He had hardly noticed it. At the time, he was preparing to marry Lauren Whitmore, heiress to one of the most powerful dynasties on Wall Street. Calitech had just raised $150 million in Series B. He spent more time on private jets than in his own home. The employees came and went. The business remained. But there, in this crowded terminal, amidst the noise, rolling suitcases, saturated loudspeakers, something inside him slowly collapsed. His voice came out like a breath that hadn't been used for too long. Mariah. Is that you? He didn't recognize the tension in his own voice. He was trembling. A little. It was imperceptible, except to her. She stared at him. Silent. Still. Not a tear. Not a smile. His gaze was neutral. Tired, but grounded, without anger. Without heat. Hello, Ethan. A simple greeting. Devoid of any apparent emotion. But his voice carried the memory of years, absences, choices, and silences. A brief moment of silence surrounded them, as if the noise of the airport had frozen around them. Then, two small voices broke the tension. Who is it, Mom? Asked one of the twins, his eyes wide open, curious, bright. Ethan looked down. There they were, right at his feet, the two little boys. Identical. Their faces turned toward him like a mystery. Mariah looked at her sons tenderly. She looked down for a moment, placed a hand on one of their shoulders, then raised her head, straight and sovereign. He's an old friend. She said this without trembling. But there was a distance in her voice. An invisible boundary. A polite barrier. A reminder, you are nothing more. Ethan crouched slowly, uncomfortable in his expensive clothes that weren't made for this. He gave them an awkward, almost fragile smile. What are your names, boys? I'm Elijah, and he's Evan. We're 6 years old. Their voices were clear. Singing. They seemed both curious and confident, at ease in their world. But Ethan felt an explosion cross his heart. His breath caught for a split second. The boy's eyes. These eyes. These brown shades crossed with golden reflections. He had seen them before. Every morning, in his mirror. Every evening, in the rare photos of his childhood. They were his own. Without a doubt. It was not a coincidence. It was his blood. He slowly straightened up, meeting Mariah's gaze. His heart was beating faster than it had in years. His voice was hoarse, choked with disbelief. Are these, my children? She didn't answer right away. She didn't turn away either. She looked at him for a long time. Not to hurt him. Not to punish him. But like a woman who had waited a long time for this moment and refused to dramatize it. Then she took a deep breath. Yes. They are your sons, Ethan. Ethan stood there frozen. Around him, the din of the airport, shrill announcements, the rolling of suitcases, raised voices, seemed to die down. As if the entire terminal had gone into a holding pattern. He couldn't hear anything anymore. He couldn't see anything anymore. Only her. And them. His sons. A subtle dizziness invaded him, a sensation he did not know, the gross guilt he wanted to say something. Anything. But no words could escape his lips. Finally, his voice came out, weak, almost childlike. Why? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you leave like that? Mariah stood straight. Her breath hitched for a moment, but her shoulders didn't slump. She met his gaze calmly, as if she'd been preparing for this question for years. Because you were engaged, Ethan. Because you were building your empire, your facade. And because in your eyes, at that time, I was just a housekeeper. A discreet shadow in your big, silent house. She paused. He didn't interrupt her. He couldn't. The day I told you I was late, you looked at me as if I had committed a crime. And you said, very calmly, it would be better if you didn't make waves. She spoke the words with surgical precision. They felt like a slap in the face. I don't remember telling you that, he stammered, pale. Mariah nodded gently. Her tone was neither accusatory nor melodramatic. It was factual, lucid, and sharp. Maybe not those exact words. But the message was clear. You didn't want any complications. No shadow over your marriage, no rumors, no story. I wasn't a human being in your eyes. Just a risk to manage, an embarrassment to avoid. The twins, a few feet away, sat on the ground, absorbed in a little game of toy airplanes. They were still unaware of the silent hurricane passing just above them. Ethan looked down, ashamed. A burning sensation rose in the pit of his throat. He saw that time again. Yes, he was arrogant. Cold. Obsessed with his image. Anything that did not directly serve its interests was relegated to the background, or brushed aside altogether. What did you do next? He asked, his voice lower. I left. She spoke these words as a declaration of survival. I left the state without looking back. I sold everything I owned, took a bus south. I found a small studio apartment in the Bronx, then a night job at a hospital as a nurse's aide. I worked until the day before I gave birth. And I gave birth to 2 boys, alone, with no insurance, no family. Just, with my own 2 arms. She inhaled, her gaze still clear. And I raised them. I fed them. Taught them. Loved them. And I taught them never to hate a man, even if he ran away. Ethan staggered, as if the words had split his sternum. He looked at his sons, carefree, playing at flying imaginary airplanes. They were beautiful. Strong. Full of life. And he had nothing to do with it. The image was unbearable. He felt his legs go weak. He slowly sank onto the nearest bench, one hand on his forehead. For the first time in perhaps 20 years, Ethan Callahan didn't know what to say anymore. The silence that followed Mariah's words was heavy, almost palpable. Ethan stood there, staring at the twins as they played carefreely with a small plastic airplane. His heart was pounding, yet it seemed suspended in time, as if frozen by a simple but consequential question. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. Where are you going? Mariah met his gaze and replied, with suppressed pride and a new light in her eyes. In London. Elijah and Evan have just enrolled in an international program for gifted children. They received a full scholarship. The weight of his words hit Ethan hard. London. An entire continent. A life he hadn't known, days, nights, first words, first steps, successes without him. He looked at the boys. They were laughing, talking to each other, carefree. 2 joyful, confident, luminous little beings, shaped by a strong, unwavering mother. He should have been there. He wanted to be there. Every second. The emotion rose, painful and sincere. He took a step toward Mariah, his gaze determined. Mariah, let me fix this. I want to be a part of their lives. I want to get to know them. I want to be their father. Silence fell again, heavier this time. Mariah stared at him for a long time, with an almost maternal gravity, as if she were weighing each word, each hope. Being a father, Ethan, is not a request. It's a journey. She paused, her eyes shining with a harsh but true truth. They don't know you. You weren't there. But you can start. If you want. These words resonated in his soul like a call. That day, Ethan did not take his flight to Geneva. He bought a ticket to London without further hesitation. Then began for him a long, difficult, but sincere journey. For months, he attended every school meeting via video conference, even when jet lag made his eyes burn with fatigue. He sent handwritten letters every week, not checks or luxury gifts, but simple words, stories, shared memories. He sought to understand his sons, to gain their trust without haste. He sought help from a therapist, finally accepting responsibility for his past mistakes. Every evening, from his screen, he read them stories, adventure novels, tales of courageous men and women. He patiently answered their questions, even when they confronted him with his flaws. And he learned to accept the silences, those moments when the distance seemed unbridgeable, when the absence of the past weighed heavily. Little by little, thanks to his consistency and sincerity, the walls began to fall. The road was still long, but for the first time, Ethan was no longer running away. He was ready to become not only a businessman, but a father. A real father. A year later, at Heathrow Airport, Terminal 2. The crowd swarmed to the shrill announcements of arriving flights. The glass doors opened. Weary travelers, impatient families, signs raised above their heads. But amidst the commotion, two figures in school uniforms burst forward at full speed. Papa Ethan, Elijah and Evan shouted as they ran. A man in a sober suit, his coat open despite the February cold, held a handmade, slightly shaky sign with letters drawn in felt-tip pen. Papa Ethan. When he saw the twins, his face lit up with a genuine, gentle smile, unlike the one he offered at high society dinners or in front of the flashbulbs of business journalists. He opened his arms, and the boys threw themselves into them, laughing. Ethan Callahan knelt down, hugging them with emotion held back for too long. I missed you, my champions. Every day. Every minute. They laughed excitedly, both talking at the same time. Elijah showed him his class representative badge. Evan took a crumpled scroll out of his backpack. Look, Dad, he said. It was a clumsy but touching drawing. 3 figures with disproportionate arms and huge smiles. A woman with long black hair, 2 almost identical boys, and a man with a tie and round eyes. This is us. We put you here because now you're really our dad. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He wanted to reply, but no words came. Only the silent tears rolling down his cheeks. He kissed his sons' foreheads, one by one, for a long time. Standing slightly back, near a pillar, Mariah watched the scene. She wore a dark wool coat, her hands clasped around a worn bag. Her gaze was soft but lucid. She had seen too many broken promises in his life. But what she saw there, that day, was more than a gesture. It was a transformed man. Ethan slowly stood up, holding each child's hand. He approached her. Thank you for giving them this strength. This light. I want to preserve it, Mariah. Not buy it, not decorate it. Earn it. She stared at him for a moment. He was no longer the arrogant 28-year-old, heir to an empire, ignorant of the consequences of his words. He had changed. Not into a Prince Charming, but into a man who had made the journey, step by step. She nodded. Come on then. We'll miss the subway. They walked out together, the boys running ahead of them, laughing loudly. Ethan carried one of the suitcases, while Mariah tucked the drawing into her bag, like a fragile treasure. In that anonymous London crowd, no one knew who he was. He wasn't Ethan Callahan, Forbes featured CEO. He was not the man of colossal fortune or the coveted bachelor of the magazines. He was a father. And that day, in the light cold of London, it was his greatest wealth.